Hi, my name is Fehinti Balogun. I'm an actor, writer, creative, and yeah, I've been about a bit. I went to drama school, done some telly, I've done some films, a lot of theatre. I recently wrote a project called Can I Live, which was a lecture I adapted from my mum's voice notes, which I took and toured around London, and we turned it into a film.
The more greenhouse gases we have, the longer our planet hugs this heat.
Thank you, Fehinti. I will start with a very basic question. When and how did you get involved with the climate crisis agenda?
Cut to, I get my first lead part in a West End show, and it is the hottest year in history, after being the hottest year in history, and I see it for the first time. I see dead food, crops across the continent, and grass, and I start developing climate anxiety, which I've never had before. And imagine it, I'm doing my dream job, what I trained to do, and all of a sudden it doesn't really mean anything because I can't enjoy it. So then I started trying to take up different projects and things for myself. And then I joined XR, Extinction Rebellion, after I was doing a play in Bath, and they were doing a talk there, and I went to this talk and I thought, wow, this is amazing. And I did lots of organising with them. And then I got into an argument with my mum, because I went off to do a film. And when I got back from the film, my mum was like, why are you sacrificing your career to be part of these people? And I thought, oh, no, that's not what I'm doing. I'm doing what's important. We argued. And then at the end of the argument, I recorded all of what she said secretly on my phone. I had put it under a pillow. And then I listened back to those recordings and I thought, God damn it, she has a lot of good points. So then I took those points, those recordings, and formed a climate lecture, because I saw my part of this as being able to use my privilege from acting, my privilege from having these different backgrounds. I'm not from a particularly wealthy background, and kind of like a council house kid. And there's lots of stuff that I now have because of acting, connections I have, people I know, and all these different perspectives. And it's like, wow, I can really use that to bridge the gap and try and bring these people together through the thing I trained in, which is communication and entertainment. So I put together this sort of lecture, which was more like a TED talk, using my mum's voice recordings. And then, that kind of took off. One thing led to another. We started working into a play, and then it became a film. And then that's kind of how my climate journey kind of suddenly took over my life, where I thought, this is a really important thing.
Your mother is the real star of the film. What are the most important points she was raising to you during the development of this piece of work?
So many good points. One of the good points is just the weight of what it means to resist authority when you are minoritized. Statistically, what that means for your upbringing, and not just your future, the mindset that has been given to people like my mum, to my aunties, my uncles, of like the good immigrant, and how we inherit those things. And this is something she didn't tell me explicitly, but something I intuitive from everything she was telling me. It's like, it feels like the government do something and then you just get on with it. Like you aren't able to engage because you're lucky to have what you have, right? And she was just like, there are people that are waiting to get into the country. There are people that are waiting for their citizen status, and you think they're gonna resist the very country that tells them they can't be there in the first place. So my mum highlighted all of those things.
Climate change is modern colonialism.
For those in Brazil who are not able to watch the film yet, how would you describe it?
Basically, the film is an explanation of climate change beyond the typical, and from the perspective of a person of colour. it is aimed to be unashamedly critical of the government, whilst also not blaming any single one person. It's all true, and it's all from my personal experience, and I think that was really important because I didn't want anybody to feel shame when watching the film. It's not about shame. That's also part of the culture of kindness. It's not about shaming people. It's about educating people and connecting with people. And I want people to watch it and see parts of themselves, whether it's in all of it or some bits, or they see their mum or their grandma or their friends in these conversations. So the film was aiming at doing that, of taking you through that whole journey in history and then getting to where we are now and starting to gear people up to doing more, for finding where they're useful and what their capacity is.
Fehinti, in your opinion, how to engage and connect on the climate crisis agenda those who are struggling to make a living?
The biggest thing I've learned in communicating with anybody is that you have to meet them where they're at. You can't go up to someone expecting them to be at your enthusiasm level or your level of anger or disgust or disdain, because everybody's got something going on in their lives. And what we have in this system is we're constantly being told that we individually have to fix something and that it is our individual fault. So the fact that you're experiencing so much food insecurity is either because you didn't work hard enough, or you're not doing this, or 20 years ago you didn't save that, or da-da-da. And if you'd done all those things, you'd be fine and it's your fault and blah, 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 blah. So then you have to look at it structurally. I think it's got to be structural and spiritual. And I mean spiritual in the sense of I can spew all of my stuff about structure and activism stuff, but at the end of the day, if your plate is full, your plate is full. We have this term called parachute activism in the UK. And it's when you go into community, you tell them what's important, and then you fly away and you leave them with all these things and expect them to fix the thing. It's so much deeper than that. And it's so lonely and difficult being told that you have loads of problems you need to fix. And at the heart of it really is community. I think the opposite to individualism is community and organising in that sense.
And how would you describe the status of the climate change debate in the UK at the moment?
Oh, blimey, that is a hard question. So right now in the UK, we have a government that isn't taking this as seriously as it should, has never taken racism as seriously as it should. We have a whole economy that is based off a history of slavery that isn't discussed. And then within schools, we erase that history. So if we're talking real here about what we're taught in this country, it's nowhere near where it should be, actually. But if we're talking about the thoughts and feelings about climate change, it's there. People know, but most people just don't know what to do. Most people think climate change is getting hotter and it's going to get harder and there's going to be floods. But most people don't think about food insecurity. Most people don't think about outside of the UK. Most people don't think about very simple things like if I buy a house in a certain area of London, in 10 years it will be flooded and I can't sell it or live in it. That's just not a thing that's in a conversation because we're not there yet. And when we are there, it's going to be really shocking for a lot of people. And I think it's at those points that the work of the communicators and the artists needs to be the foundation of the next conversation, which is how do we provide an equitable future for us all here?
You were with Brazilian indigenous artists and leaders at COP26 last year.
Nós estamos aqui não é somente lutando para a gente, para todo mundo, para que a gente tem que ensinar nossos filhos, nossos netos, para que eles possam salvar nosso planeta.
What would you say about how their discourses resonated with you and with those in the UK?
COP is a disappointing event overall. It didn't inspire me in the least. What was inspiring was all the activists that were there and the different people from all these different countries doing all these amazing things. and talking about like, gosh, about history and about resistance and
COP26 has been a failure. We need to phase out, not phase down subsidy. We need to fund adaptation and loss in the global south.
it's so strong. I got such a sense of like family. And it's really hard in the UK, especially in London, especially like a certain age demographic, because you move every 2 years. You move around. So how can you have that strength of community and bond when you're never in one place for very long?
Fehinti, and here's a question we ask in almost all the interviews: how to strengthen the global climate movement during this very complex moment we are going through?
Part of the civil rights movement was education on the mass scale, and very specifically to different communities. So we're not working with fear, we're working through fear onto the other side of that thing. So massively, in order to strengthen the movement, mass education, and very specifically in different zones. And then it needs to be all of these different grassroots movements coming together. No, three things: coming together, different grassroots movements, making sure the education's out there and everybody knows very specifically, and it's not about doom and gloom, it's about practically we're moving through it. And three, being very specific with the community groups.
Great. In terms of shifts in the narrative, what are the ones that you consider most important and most urgent that we need?
Whenever we go about fixing climate change, we go, oh, let's recycle, or oh, let's do this thing. And we don't go, this company is taking up however many resources of this thing, or these like commercial flights are more than anything that any of us have ever done, because we live in a carbon economy. You can't equate the petrol of a farmer getting from their farm to a store, or for someone from a low income to being able to drive to work, to a billionaire taking an 8-minute journey on a private jet. You can't equate those two things.
We are losing 350,000 hectares of land per year due to drought, desertification. That is 1,544 Olympic-sized parks.
Brazil is very polarized at the moment, and political violence is in the streets, as you might have heard of. Precisely because of this, could you further describe this concept of radical kindness? So,
for instance, within the sort of George Floyd-ness of everything, when everyone, especially friends of colour, was being asked to do the work, was being asked to explain things and share grief for a moment. And, where has that gone now? And just do all this stuff, and then being asked to do this and take on these questions. And then before that even happened, you were being called argumentative or abrasive and all of these different things. So in order to not be called those things, you had to go, well, it's not that I feel this way, I just feel a bit uncomfortable with this. You have to sacrifice the thing that you really want to say is just treat me like a person. So coming back to the polarized nature of things, or being radically kind. What I mean by being radically kind is not just being radically kind to the person with the opposite opinion to you, but also being radically kind to yourself, because sometimes these conversations don't serve you. Why am I trying to get someone who fundamentally hates me to like me? How does that serve me or serve that other person? Because at the end of the day, regardless of whether or not they said they liked me or didn't like me, they can walk away and I'm left with this thing. And the only way you can deal with that thing is you have a community behind you that's willing to share that thing. Do you get what I mean? So in all of these things, you're moving away from this individual, I'm going to fix the world, to this these are the people that I need in order to be able to do this thing. I always talk about, when I talk to people, you have to make a choice when you're talking to someone, especially someone with an opposite opinion to do, especially someone with an opposite opinion to you who has no stake in it. For instance, racism, sexism, or even climate change. When they are not affected emotionally, physically, practically by the thing, and they argue against you, you have to make the choice of, can I do this today? How far do I want to go? Do I have people looking after me when I finish this conversation? Is there somewhere, because you cannot sustain that constant because it doesn't affect that person until it does. And until it does do that, you're doing all of this work that may not amount to something that feeds you to continue doing that work. So the radical kindness isn't just having a space for this other person, it's for yourself.
In terms of actions, practical actions, what are the ones that you propose for those who are not into activism?
I think we start to do divesting from fossil fuels. Make sure, like, equity, which is our union, making sure that our pensions are invested in fossil fuels. Very simple. Like, making sure that we are not actively part of a fossil fuel future. Making sure that all of our materials are sustainable. And not just that, but if we are a local theatre company or a local filming company, that we are sourcing things from the community. So we're giving back to the community, involving the community, like not just parachuting in, doing this thing and leaving. Like, it's all mimics nature. Nature has no waste. Nature has no waste. It doesn't. Everything is reused, and it's so amazing. So art and its making like that can be like that. And
thank you very much, Fehinti, for your time and for joining Planeta in Transe. I hope that those in Brazil are able to watch your film very soon. Bye-bye.